Okay, good day, everyone. Happy to have you here. Hope you're having a good day. So we're going to be continuing from our EMA crossover strategy that we're trying to build. We're going to see how we're going to actually start the process of doing that and get it completed. Then we're going to test it. And then in the subsequent class, we'll see how we can optimize it and how we can even take it a step further, right? So feel free to ask your questions, drop in your questions, and I will come back to them, right? Now, so from the last, from the part one, we did discuss, we're trying to build the EMA strategy, right? We're trying to build an EMA crossover strategy. And it was based on the fact that we're trying to take advantage of the fact that when price is moving in an ascending manner, in a bullish manner, the EMA tends to go below price, right? So what we did is we're like, okay, if we're going to combine two EMAs, I will call one fast, which a period of 5, and the other one we'll call it slow with a period of 12. Well, what we notice is they will be moving, somewhat together, and then until price, kind of change trend. So when the trend changes, something like this, what you find is that this other EMA will start to catch up with this one and they would cross over like so. So we're trying to say, okay, if we can take advantage of those areas of crossover and use them as buying or selling decisions, we can potentially ride the trend. So the points to note is that this EA we're trying to build is supposed to work best in a trending market, right? So if we get on the market, get in on a trade and it starts trending, we have a good chance of running the trend. Now, remember, what we're doing here is for educational purposes, or showing you how to build your EA. You can take this and then the whole idea of this workshop, by the end of the section, is for you to be able to understand how to at least get started in doing some more advanced stuff. This, while we're done, is for training purposes only. You can have the raw file from the next classes on how you can then start to test it and back test, okay? Now, so we'll outline what we're trying to do. We're using this to make up our mind in terms of buying and selling decisions. We're looking at 2 moving average, the 5-period moving average and the 12-period moving average. Now, we're going to be using those to make decisions. In terms of buying, we want to be looking to buy when the 5-period moving average is crossing above the 12-period moving average. When we see that happen, we want to trigger a buy, and then we want to sell when the 5-period moving average is crossing below the 12-period moving average, and that will be our reason for selling, right? Now, like I mentioned in the last class, we're not going to be using, we can actually set it so that once you enter a buy, maybe you have a stop loss like 20 pips, let's say target at 40 pips or something like that. But what we're going to be doing, like I mentioned, is we're going to be using this, we're going to be using the dynamic stop loss, right? So when we enter a buy, right, it's going to close that buy when a different criteria is met, and then it will trigger the sales, okay? Now, I hope that makes sense. I hope we're all following. Give me a yes or a thumbs up if everybody's understands what I've just talked about up until this point. I hope we're all together, right? Okay, so now we've understood, or at least I want to believe that we understand what we are trying to accomplish. And then what we need to do is, what I always like to do then, therefore, is to, create a flow chart, right? To create a flow chart so that we can always reference this. Now, I didn't want to do this live, while we were live, because to take some part of our time. So I already did it because I just completed the class on this in the office here. So I already did the flow chart to explain it, and then we'll just walk through it together, right? So like I mentioned, when it comes to EA, one of the first things we always want to do is to check for trades, right? So an EA or a robot is supposed to automatically make decisions on our behalf or based on parameters that we have given to it, right? Now, so the first thing we want to do is we want to check for trades. That's if they are open trades, right? So check trade conditions is just like it's saying, okay, we're going to look to see if there are any open trades that are being opened by this EA, right? So if there is any open trade opened by the EA, the answer to that can either be yes or no. So if the answer is yes, well, it wouldn't execute the rest of this code, more or less, right? However, if the answer is no, that means there are no open positions, then it will proceed to the next step. So it will start, the next thing will be to check for the 5-period moving average and the 12-period moving average, as you can see here, right? So check if there are no open trades, to check the 5-period moving average and the 12-period moving average. Now, what is it checking? Remember that we had in our explanation here, we said we want to look to buy when the 5-period moving average is crossing above the 12. We want to buy when the 5-period moving average crosses above the 12, and want to sell when the 12-period moving average or the 5-period moving average crosses below the 12. So therefore, what we have is, if it checks and there are no open trade, it will check the EMAs, the indicators that we've set. And what it will look for is the 5-period moving average. So you can see this symbol here, this symbol X, and this sign means crossing greater than, right? So this is greater than sign. So what this means is the 5-period moving average crossing above the 12. If the answer is yes, then it will proceed to this part of the code and open a buy trade, right? Now, it is watching this at the close of the candle. It is using the candle close, not the opening, not the real-time candle. It's using the close of the candle to make that decision. So if it finds that the 5-period moving average, that means at the close of the candle, the 5-period moving average just crossed the 12, it will open a buy trade. Else, if the 5-period is not crossing above the 12, it will check if the 5-period moving average is crossing below the 12-period moving average. And if that were to be the case, well, it will open a sell, right? I hope we're together. So please, everybody, give me a quick yes. I know I'm carrying at least most of the people. Remember, I'm going to be uploading this, so you can always rewatch it. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can always reverse and kind of understand what I just mentioned. So I hope we're all following. I hope it all makes sense. We're giving it instructions to watch the EMAs, the 5 and the 12, and then take a decision based on the outcome of those results. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, so yes. Okay, so I have just one yes. Is it just one person that gets it? Okay, well, once it checks that, it will then proceed to take the necessary action depending on the inputs that we have assigned to it. Okay, now, but look at this. This is for opening a trade, right? So what you see here has nothing to do with how to manage the trade. That means if we just build the EA like this, what will happen is the market will just open 2 trades, and those, it's open a buy when the criteria is met, or a sell when the criteria is met, and that will be all the trades that the market will take, because it doesn't have a way to close the trade, and it will not take another trade because, well, it will check trade condition and that trade will still be open, so it will do nothing. So now this is going to this now is the first phase of our flowchart or of our EA, where we are looking to execute the trade. Now, what we need to do next is then manage the trades that has been executed, because remember, I want to be able to get in and out of trades once criteria are met. So that takes us to the next flowchart that I built, which will help us to understand how we manage open trades, right? Now, there are 2 types of trades, either a buy or it's a sell. So what we want to do, remember in this one, the first thing we did was we check for trading conditions, right? So although here it says if it finds that there is a trade, it will stop. Well, it doesn't actually stop, because if it finds that it's a trade, it's supposed to go down here and stop. That means it's not supposed to run the rest of the code, right? However, what is actually happening is, yes, it wouldn't run the rest of the code if it finds a trade. Instead, this other parameter will be triggered, where it would then indeed look for this session. So if there is a trade, right, and if that trade is a buy, then it will run this code. Otherwise, if the code, if there's an open trade, if there's an open trade and the trade is a sell, it will run this part. So now let's look at what it's actually going on underneath the whole the whole system. Now, if it checks and there's a buy, right, it will check the indicator. So remember, I made mention that we're going to use dynamic stop loss, right? Well, instead of using hard stop loss and take profits, we want to buy when the EMA crossover. So where this crossover actually happened here, okay, that is looking too gibberish. So where the crossover, something like this, that is where it wants to open a buy, for example. And let's say the market continues to go, it would close this buy trade when, you know, they now cross the opposite way, right? And this will be the parameter for the close of the buy, right? So basically, or essentially, what it's doing here is, if there's a buy trade, it will check the indicator, the 5-period and the 12-period moving average. At the close of the candle, it will check, is the 5-period moving average crossing below the 12-period moving average? Remember that the parameter, the instruction to execute a buy trade is if the 5 is crossing above the 12. So we are buying because the 5 is crossing above the 12, but it will close the buy when the 5 is crossing below the 12. Does that make sense? Right? And remember, when the 5 is crossing below the 12, that is also simultaneously the trigger for a sell trade, right? So that means when it closes the buy, it would trigger the sell, right? So if it checks and there's a buy trade, if it checks and sees that at the close of the candle, the 5-period moving average is crossing below the 12, it will close that buy position. If it checks and there's a sell trade, it will check if the 5-period moving average is crossing above the 12, and then it will close the sell trade. So you can see it would manage itself, trigger a buy, and then close that buy and trigger a sell. Now, like I mentioned, you can use hard code stop loss and, you know, impute 10 pips here, 5 pips there, and try and run that. But because we are trying to capture the trend, the idea of this setup is so that we can capture the main trend, because when the market is trending, you know, we want to capture the midst of the trend, and this way we would come out on top, most likely, right? So, which is the reason why we want to wait for the crossover, such that at that point, that is where we would close the buy that was triggered down here, right? I hope that makes sense, and I hope that is clear. Now, let's now take all of this information that we have just discussed and let us implement it on our, you know, to create our first EA. So now I will jump over to the FX Dreamer web-based software. What you want to do is, this is what it's going to look like when you load a builder window. So when you start up, you would see options, you would see the options to load the builder window. So what you want to then do is, so when you load it as fresh, you can rename it whatever you want. This one is called EMA crossover 1. It's a blank window. So what we're going to do is now proceed to do, you know, to put all of these things that we said now into, you know, into work, right? We're going to take all of this English, all of these things, and make build a trading robot out of it. Okay. Now, first here, we want to check for trade conditions, right? We want to check trade conditions. So the first things I always like to do, that you want to do, at least what we want to do here, is we want to check, right? So you come here, you see check trading conditions, trade order accounts. We're checking for no trades, right? So first we want to check if there are no trades. That's the reason why we are selecting this one, right? Now, as personally, I always like to, you know, state variables that I will use, right? Now, the reason is it's easy for me to change any parameter that I want to change in between. Let's say I'm trying to test something, or I want to change something across board. Instead of using it everywhere, instead of changing it everywhere, I just have to change it at just one location. So basically, some of the things we'll be needing is the EMA fast and the EMA slow, and also our lot size, the lot size that we'll be using, right? So under this constant or inputs here, if you click on it, you'd see, okay, so I already have, so let me just delete all of it so I can redo it so you see, right? So this is what it's going to look, it's just going to be something like this. So what I want to do is just, for those of you who understand programming, it's like I'm creating a function, or I'm creating a constant that I can call on, right, anytime within the life of this project, right? As long within the life of this project, I can always call on this constant. Now, so I'm putting, there are different types of inputs. So there's double. So double is for numbers that have decimal places, right? Then there's integer, those are for whole numbers. Then there's strings, then there's Boolean for true and false, all of those things. But what the first one I want to be creating is, so we'll be needing lots, right? So the lot size can be 0.01, 0.1, so it's a double, right? And I'm just going to call this lots, and the value would be 0.1, right? Just for, that means the start lots for the trade is going to execute at 0.1 lot. Now, I'm going to need another variable. This one I'm going to call, it's going to be an integer because it's going to be a whole number. So the fast moving average, we're going to call it EMA underscore fast. So the fast moving average is what 5, right? The period we decided we were going to use is going to be the 5 period moving average, right? So the fast period moving average is 5. So what I'm going to just do here is call it EMA fast, give it the value of 5. I'm going to also add the second EMA, call this one EMA slow, and give it the value of 12, right? And then I could just name the project and so this one will be a string. Let's just call it a string. String is for numbers and letters, right? So this will be the EA name, the name of our EA, and we want to probably reference it at every trade the EA takes. And let's just call it anything. Let's call it ANSO 1, right? Let's call it ANSO underscore EA1. So that will be what it referenced, and then we update it. Now you'll see in a bit why I prefer to do it this way. You can build the EA without having to call all of this, but what it means is you will need to, if you want to make a change, you have to make it everywhere, right? Don't worry, you get that in a bit. So I hope I'm carrying everybody along, at least most people. I hope you guys are following me. Now, I'm going to be referencing both the documents we created in building this, because this will help you to understand what we are trying to accomplish and help it to make sense to you. So we are trying to build this. We built a flow chart for executing a trade. And the first thing we want to do is check if there are no trades, right? So we check if there are no trades. If there's an open trade, well, we don't want to execute another one. However, if there's no open trade, we want to check for conditions to execute a trade, right? So if there's an open trade, if there are no open trades, we want to proceed. So we go back to our stuff. You can, if you want to modify, so you can pick up a parameter from here, right? You can click on it and double click on it and modify it. You can change the name. So I'm going to just right click on this. If you want to change the name, so let me close this, right click, select edit title, and I'll say no trade in brackets. Let's say buy / sell. That means when if there are no buy or sell trades, then this is just this is not, it's not a constant, it's not a necessity, but it will help you to be able to understand what exactly you are trying to do, right? Let's say you come back sometime later, you'll be able to see exactly what you understand or read your code basically. Anyway, it's not a code, but you get the idea. So we're going to check if there are trades. If there are no trades, both buy and sell. So this is fine. We're not doing anything here. So the next thing we want to do is this. If there is no open trade, we want to check the 5 period moving average and the 12 period moving average. You can see that on your screen. We want to check 5 period moving average and 12 period moving average. So what we do is we go to conditions / formula and we select a condition, right? Right. So now there are 2 conditions, right? So let's take the first one first. We want to check. So if I go back here, you'd see, not there, here, you'd see that we want to check. There are 2 conditions. You can see them in this rhombus type of shape. The first one is we want to check if the 5 period is greater or is crossing above the 12 period. And if that is the case, we want to buy. Otherwise, if the 5 is crossing below the 12, we want to sell, right? So that's what we're trying to do here. The condition first is we want to check. So there are several things you can check. You can check for candles. You can check for many other things, for change values, and you can select indicator. But what we're picking now is the indicator of the moving average, right? So we're picking the moving average indicator, right? Now, under periods, it's already 5 here. So, but remember, we don't want to, I can leave this at 5 and make this 12, and that will be fine. But what I would do is just right click and select EMA fast, which is also 5, right? EMA fast. Now, the advantage of doing this is if, for example, I want to change, right? I want to change the period of the moving average, right? Instead of going to every single place I have the EMA, the fast EMA, I'll just change it once at the constant level, at the, the area of where we, what would I call it? We called the variable, right? So that's the idea. Now, the method is the exponential moving average you want to use. So you select exponential. You also want to use the close of the candle. Now, under more settings, you want to, the candle ID that we are trying to reference is 1, right? We're trying to reference candle ID 1. So what that means is we're looking at the current candle. That means it is checking the current candle, not the previous candle, not the 10th previous candle, not the next candle, the current candle, right? And the time frame will leave that as current. Now, so this is all this is what we just did now is we just called out the 5-period moving average. So we want to compare the 5, if you go here, you'd see that what we are doing is we want to check the 5-period moving average and the 12-period moving average. However, for a buy, when the 5-period moving average is crossing above the 12-period moving average, that is when we are looking to buy, right? And then this section we're trying to to call here is for the buy section. So we're looking at the 5-period moving average, and then under this, the comparison, we're checking if it is crossing above. Well, we come here and we call the 12-period. We also make this exponential, and we also make sure that we're looking at the current candle, right? I hope you guys are following, right? So we're checking if the 5-period moving average is crossing above the 12-period moving average, we're looking at the current candle, and then we would update this. So that is set. Now you can rename this so that you can understand what you're trying to do. Maybe later when you come back to it, you could just name it EMA buy, and just connect this one to this like this. And then this is the EMA buy. And if this is the case, so if, remember, go back here again, if the 5-period is crossing above the 12, we want to buy, right? So that means we need to take an action. So buy, sell, you can see it here, we click on buy now, right? Now, double click on it. You see here that says fixed volume, right? Instead of using a fixed volume, which is still the same 0.1, yeah, we're using fixed volume, but we will just change it to the lots that we defined earlier. So it's still the same thing, but this way, if I want to change it, I can just change it there. I don't need to change it under buy, change it under sell, change it everywhere, okay? And then remember, I also mentioned that for this strategy, we're not going to be looking to use hard-coded stop loss or hard-coded take profits. What we're going to be looking to do is close the trade, manage it, use dynamic stop loss, right? So if, for example, we enter a buy because the 5-period moving average has crossed above the 12-period moving average, we want to close that buy trade when the 5-period moving average is crossing below the 12. So that means we want to close the buy trade at this point of intersection here, and that would also be the sign to execute a sell, right? So what we're going to do then is instead of using a fixed PIP, we will select no stop loss, right? Because we will manage this differently, right? I hope you guys are following. Now, the same thing, no take profits. And then under more settings, you can, so this is if you want to, your identifier for your EA, not necessary, but this is where you place comment. For those of you who have seen an EA trade, you would see comments attached to it. So you can just put your EA name and we'll update that, right? And then we will just connect this. So right now, what we've just done is we've built the tree for the first, the first leg, this leg of this our EA, where we check for a buy section. Now we need to also check for sells so that I can know what to do when and how to handle it. Now, so what we do is we select conditions. Now you can copy and reuse areas, but because I'm trying to show you this, I'm going to just redo it. So we select the conditions. We can rename this and make this EMA sell. So I'm just going to do EMA underscore sell. And that will be that. And then double click on it. We're looking at the moving average. We're looking at the 5 periods. So we change this to, still selects the constant. We're looking at the exponential, and we're using the close of the candle. We also want to be looking at the current candle. So we use candle ID1, right? Now for sales, so we come back here. For sales, we want to look if the 5 period moving average is crossing below the 12, right? So we go back, we're looking to see the 5 cross below the 12. We're looking at the 12 period slow moving average. We're also using the exponential, and we are looking at the recent candle. Okay, so we click update, and you have that set. So we can connect this to here like so. And now, if that condition is met, what do we want to do? We want to open a sell, right, at the close of the candle, right? So we go and we pick an action. We select sell now. Now, what we want to do is just come here, use the lot size defined, and then remember, we are also not using hard-coded stop losses and hard-coded take profit. If you wanted to just put, okay, put stop loss 10 pips, put take profit 20 pips, you can just type in that here. But remember, for this project, we're doing it this way, okay? And then you can go under here and right click and select your EA name. Okay, so update, and we are good like so. Okay, so now you see that we've done this whole thing here. We have just built this first part, right? We've just built this first part. But here's the thing. This is an explanation of what is actually going on, right? This is an explanation of what is really going on. It will check for trade condition. It will check, is there any open trade? If it doesn't find any open trade, well, it will check for the buy condition. And what is the buy condition? Well, is the 5 period moving average crossing above the 12? So is the 5 period moving average crossing above the 12? That's question mark. If the answer is yes, it will trigger a buy. Otherwise, is the 5 crossing below the 12? If the answer is yes, to trigger a sell. So right now, even though we have done, the first part, this is not enough, because what will happen is if one of the parameters is met, let's say a buy, for example, is met, it will just open the buy, and it will not know how to close the buy, and it will not, it will not know how to close the buy. It will just be running, right? Or if it opens a sell, it will not know how to close the sell. It will just be running. So what we need to then do is set up parameters so that it can then know what to do when a trade is open and then proceed, which is why we built this area here, such that if there is a buy trade open, it will continue to check the 5 period and the 12 period moving average at the close of each candle. For a buy trade, it will then check if the 5 is now crossing below. Remember, it started buying because the 5 crossed above. However, when the candle closes and the 5 is crossing below, that will be the sign for it to close the buy trade and also simultaneously open the sell trade. Because remember, this parameter here is the 5 crossing below the 12. Even though it is the criteria for closing a buy, you can see it here. It is also the criteria here for opening a sell, right? So it will close the buy and open the sell. And then the same thing would apply here. If it checks and there's a trade and the trade is a sell, it would look at the close of the candle and see if the 5 period is crossing above the 12, and then it will close the sell. And that's it. Okay, so now let's also implement that on our builder window. Okay, so now remember, what we want to do is we want to check, right? Look at this, we want to check if there's a buy or if there's a sell, right? So we come here under trading, under check trade conditions, under check trading condition plus other accounts, we select if trade, right? So we select if trade. I'm going to modify this and edit this because this is going to check for only buys. So we're going to check if trade in brackets buys, right? So what we're going to do, double click on it, right? Under filter by type. Remember, I want to check for just the buys and so that we can know what to do. So if it's a buy, we change this to buy, we click on update. If it's a buy, what do we want to do? Well, if it is a buy, we want to, if that means if the open trade. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight this area like this, right? We're going to create an area for it. Let's just create this. let's rename this open order. Okay. And then this, no, not looping to yourself. Yeah. Okay. So, and then this one here, we're checking for if buy. Now, what's back to our parameters? If there's an open buy, we want to check if the 5 period is now crossing below the 12, and that will serve as our reason for closing the buys. You can copy and reuse. So, for example, you can just right click and copy this, but I'm just going to redo it again so that we follow with the whole process. I'm just going to let's double click on it. I'm not going to edit the name this time. So this is going to be the 5. We're going to use the exponential. We're also going to adjust to make sure we're looking at the current candle. Current candle, this is 1. And then for a buy that we want to manage, we want to check if the buy is 5 is crossing below the 12. So this would be crossing below, right? And then this would be our slow moving average. This would be our exponential. I would also want to ensure that we're looking at the current candle as well. Okay, so we save that and then we connect this together and we have that. Now, this is what is actually happening here. It goes through, it checks, okay, there are no open trades. It checks for the condition of the buy, which is if the 5 period is crossing above the 12, it would trigger a buy, right? But that buy will continue to stay open. However, it will also continue to check, right? Anytime it looks and it checks, is there a trade? It says yes. It will not take this path, right? I hope I'm making sense. If it checks and there are no trades, that's the only time it will take any of these routes, right? However, if it checks and there's a trade running, it will then check this and say, okay, is the trade a buy? If the trade is a buy, it will say, okay, this buy trade is the moving average, is the 5 period now crossing below the 12? If the answer is yes, right? Because remember from our flow chart here, we said, some of our flow chart here, we like, if the 5 is now crossing below the 12, then we want to close the buy because it means we're likely switching over to a down market. And so we've set the parameters here like so, where we looked at this and say, is the 5 period crossing below the 12? Make sure we're looking at the current candle. What we want to do now is under trading action, we select close trade, right? So you double click on this. We want to make sure that we're only closing the buys because this condition is for the buy. So you filter by type, not buy and sell, just buys, right? And that's all you need to do here. You click on updates, you connect these two together, and we have this one running, right? So now here is the explanation. Okay, let me build the next one so that we can do the proper explanation. Now this is for buys. The next one will be for sells, right? So we go back, we look at this, we say if trade, that means if there's open trade. However, if this open trade is a sell this time, because we've captured the value for buys, so we want to look at if this one is a sell, then what we want to do is also check our moving average and their conditions. So what we want to check here, we can always reference this. We want to see, to close the sell, we want to see if the 5 period is now crossing above the 12. So we go back here, we select our moving average. This will be our fast. This would be exponential. This would be, so we go under more setting, make sure we're looking at the current candle. And then we're looking to see if the 5 is crossing above. So we're looking at crossing above. We are looking at the slow, the exponential, and we're also making sure we're looking at the current candle. Okay, and then we update and we're done with this. And we connect this like so. And then, well, if that is met, that means if it checks and there's a sell trade open, and to keep checking at the close of each candle, if the 5 period has crossed below the 12, or if the 5 period has crossed above the 12, and if that has happened, it will then proceed to do what? What do we want to do? Well, we want to close the sell trade, right? So remember, we double click, we want to make sure that we're closing just the sell for this one, just as we did the opposite for the buys. Okay, and then we click update and you connect these two together. So this area now, I'm going to create an area, and this area is going to be our area for closing, for managing open trades, right? So if this will be for opening, for open orders, and here we'll call close orders. Okay. Now, do you understand? I hope you guys are going along with me on this, right? We just basically turned this flow chart into a code or into our EA. So which we're looking, okay, is there an open trade? If there's an open trade, if there's no open trade, if there's an open trade, do nothing. If there are no open trades, then check the 5 period and the 12 period moving average. If the 5 is crossing above the 12, place a buy. Otherwise, if the 5 is crossing below the 12, place a sell, right? And then we need to be able to manage our open buys and sells. So we had this other area here where we looked for, if there's an open buy trade, check if the 5 period moving average is crossing below the 12. If that's the case, close the buy. Else, if the trade is a sell trade, check if the 5 period is crossing above the 12 and close the sell. Are we together? Does that make sense? I hope you guys are following me. Okay. Now, what we do is, this is our first EE. So you've just built your first trading robot, right? You just built your first trading robot and you're good to go. So what you have done now is we have defined, we've built our robot. What we want to do now is download a MQ4 file, and then we can deploy it on our, test it on our MT4, right? So to download your project, just click on this stuff here. You can download the .ex4 file, but most likely you probably want to get like the MQ4 file. So you just click on it. It will show you, it will just load up the window for you to download it. You can just save it to your download folder, and you have that. Now, remember, for you to be able to download your project, you probably need to pay for the software, right? So you have to pay for FX Dreamer software to be able to download and use your project, but you can't build around it. Now, so what we've just done now is built our first project and we've downloaded it. Now, like I mentioned, we've not optimized this. We're going to still take this a step further in some subsequent class, optimize this and see how to even make it even function properly. And then we'll build the subsequent one in the following classes, okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our MT4, and then we're going to run strategy tester based on this, our EA, and see how it would run, okay? So what we do now, I'm going to add a new share, my MT4, where is you? So the MT4, okay. Now, what we'll do here is, where's you? Okay, so we're just going to close this window. This was the last test I did for the physical class. Okay, now, so what we're going to do to the file you've downloaded, you need to copy it to the data folder of your, MT4. So to get the data folder of your MT4, just go to File and go to Open Data Folder, right? So Files, Data Folder, you click on that. It will show you where your indicator window is, your indicators are found, your scripts, your expert advisors, and all of those. So what we'll do now is, where did we downloaded our file, right? It was under download. We just go, you can just copy it. So I just copied. We can go back to our data folder under MQL4. Your expert advisor are found under expert. You could just paste it here, right? So pasted. And we have our EMA crossover 1, right? Our EMA crossover 1 that we just built, which is, right? Did I paste it? Yes, our EMA crossover 1. This is it that we just built, right? Okay, so now, once you've done that, what you want to do is we're going to now test it. So we copied, we pasted it. So you want to refresh. So you refresh your expert advisor tab so that it will show. And then, so to open up your strategy tester, let's say, for example, I close this here like this, just go to View, under view, just click on strategy tester or just simply click on Control R and you have that pop up as so, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to we're going to deploy our EMA crossover that we just got. You select the symbol. So we're going to test this on euro dollar. And I guess the time frame, we're going to use 1 hour. We're going to test this for 2021 January 1st to 2021 December 31st. Now, probably not allow it to run to the end, but you'd see the whole idea. Now, remember why when we were building our EAs, let me move this over. We're building our EA, we set all these parameters. So let me see. There's you. We set all of those parameters where we have the lots, the EMA slow, the EMA fast. Some of the good thing about doing it that way is you can easily change this. So let's say you tested the 5 and the 12 and you don't really like the result, but you like the result of 10 and 20. You can just change this to 10, change this to 20, play around it until you get something that suits you. And anytime you reset it, it should go back to the default setting. Yeah, right. So we're going to use the default setting. You can play around with the start lot size and all. Okay, so now that's here on Expert Advisor. Let me push this one back. And then we have everything set. What we do now is we click on Start to run the simulation. So what it's going to do now, it's going to run the simulation. So it's running. What we're going to is loading up, it's getting data, the data, and when it starts, you would see it begins to kick off. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the EMAs that we are using so that once it starts kicking off, so I'm going to pause this for now. Let's see, let's make this great. Okay, now I'm going to add the EMA. So let's add the moving average, the 12 period. Let's make it white. We're also going to add another one. Let's make it the 5 period. This is just so we can visually see what is happening, right? So we can visually see what is going on. So we have both our EMAs, right? We have both EMAs on our chart. And just looking at this, right? Looking at this, you can see we had a crossover here. I don't know if it's clear for your screen. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. So you can see we had a crossover here where the 5 is now crossing below the 12, and you see it triggered a sell at our starting lot size. That's why it's sold here. Now let's proceed and see how it goes. Now, under the graph section, you will see the growth on the account, at least on the simulated account. So let's see. Now, did you see that it opened the cell here, right? And it closed it here. Well, why did it close it there? He opened it here because the 5 period, which is actually the red one in this case, is crossing below the 12 period. And he closed it here. Why? Because the 12 period or the 5 period is now crossing above the 12. And you see, we're able to get in selling here. We're able to, it closed it for a profit here at this point here. So let's continue. Let's continue the simulation. So we keep going. You see, each new buy is a trigger. Each close of a buy is trigger for the close of a sell. So each close of a buy is triggered to open a sell and vice versa, right? So you could see here that it opened a buy. Why? Because the 5 period crossed above the 12, and it closed that buy here because the 12 crossed, the 5 crossed below the 12 in this case, right? So I'm not going to stop this so much further. We're just going to let this run a bit and see how that goes, okay? So you're seeing the simulation, we're just running, you'll see it take trades. Now this right, we have the current trade is a sell, and it started selling where? It started selling here, right? Because now we had that crossover. And you can see why we're using dynamic stop loss, because we want to capture the meat of the move, right? So we had a trigger buy, a trigger sell here, and it's still open because, well, the 5 period is still below the 12, right? And it will close the sell when the 5 is now above. So this way, you can capture the meat of the move in the market. Right now, remember, this EA is not, I'm not saying you should go and use it and deploy it. It's not probably not going to work well because there are other factors and it needs optimizing. And even if you want to use it, make sure that you are using it with proper, not necessarily risk management, but you are micro-managing it as well. This is for educational purposes, right? You probably have to build more sophisticated EAs for your strategy. Remember, this whole concept is to, just after, this whole concept, this whole concept of trade of EA is for you to automate your system. So sorry, please just hold on with your questions. When we are done, I'll answer your questions. Just let me just run the simulations and run through what we're trying to talk. So you see, it closed the cell here. Notice what happened. It closed the cell. So it closed all of these cells down here because the EMA crossed over and also triggered a buy. But that buy also closed here because the EMA crossed down over, but this one closed for a loss and it immediately triggered a sell, right? And yeah, so you have it running, it then starts up with the buy. If you look at our graph curve, well, you could see that, so let me pause. You'd see that, well, so far it's gone up from this to this, and you can see the growth, the curve on the accounts, right? So basically, we'll just build EA that looks for buyers and sell based on where the moving average is, the specific moving average is, and try to make the best out of that. Now, this EA is far from perfect. It would struggle, especially when it gets into ranging markets, and which is why in the next class, we will take it a bit further and find a way to filter out some bad trades, right? By using an even extra moving average trend, moving average to help us filter out some bad trades, okay? So remember, to join on those classes, you would have to at least have a funded account to be on those classes, at least $100 to join me on those classes. We'll be building those EEs. I'll be giving out the raw files to you as well. We'll be building 2 EEs during the lifetime of this workshop, right? And at the end of it, I'll give out an EE to you guys just to use. We'll test it out. I'll show you the result and test it. So just to use. It's also for educational purposes as well, but just to help you understand, some more concepts you can do around it. Okay. So now I think it's time to now take your questions. If you have questions, now will be the time to ask them.
Okay, thank you. My two questions. Number one, I wanted to say that while the simulation was going on, we're not seeing the trade, how would I call it now? If you put it on trade as the EA moves, we'll be able to see what was dropping in that particular account. It's a demo, fine. Number two, is it possible, apart from the EA crossover, to add any other indicator to that same, or must it just be one, must it be just crossover and that's all?
Okay, so, well, your two questions are quite simple. Now, you could see your first question about seeing the growth. You could see, so look at this graph section here. So where we were editing from, or where we played it was under setting. Now on that graph here, you can see the graph curve. It's showing you the growth or the drop on the account, right? You can see it's showing, if you look to your right, you will see the balance, right? It's showing you the simulated balance, the balance of what would have happened. There was, it appreciated, it went up even further, it came down, it went up, it came down, it went up. So you will continue to see the account, how the account balance would have grown or dropped with this graph. At the end of the simulation, right, because this is supposed to simulate a year's worth of trading. At the end of the simulation, under reports, right, there's nothing to show here. It will show you the total trades open, the total buy trades, total sell trades, the net profit, the net loss. Let me see. Let me just stop this EA here. Let me just let it run a little bit. And so you'll see it as it's going up or down. You see the graph curve move with it, right? You can see that. And then I'm going to stop it so that we can So you can see that was a massive gain that pushed it higher. And so I'm going to click on stop. And then under reports, you can see it shows you all the details of, okay, so this is, where's that? The total profits gained 376, the largest profits made, the maximum drawdown, where does this show that? Where's that? The maximum drawdown for buy trades, the maximum drawdown for sell trade, the actual absolute maximum drawdown, 26. Also, you need all of these parameters when you're deciding on, okay, what lot size to start up with and all of those things, right? So yes, that is the answer to your first question. And then your second question was about if it's only the EMA crossover. Well, if it was just the EMA crossover, I said learn how to build EMA crossover screening strategy. No, it's way more than that. You could you'll be able to build even complex. That's why I said during the lifetime of this workshop, we're going to even after we're done optimizing this, we're going to do a candlestick pattern. We're going to build candlestick patterns. Use it to make trading decisions, right? So it's entirely up to you and how I say flexible, or how it's the power of the FX Dreamer is actually quite good. It's just up to how well you can be vast enough to play around. It could be really strong, complex projects. So this would require you to have a firm understanding of it, which is why this is a good place to get started as well. Okay, so I hope I answered your two questions. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay, so
hello, sir. Yeah. I have a question, sir. My name is Micah Waziri. Okay. Sir, from this FX Dreamer platform, somebody who doesn't have knowledge of programming, will he be able to build a functional EA that he can use on live trade and make some gain?
Okay. Well, I don't think we did any programming here. If anybody thinks we did any programming here, let me know. But I don't think we did any programming. We just clicked and dragged and dropped, drag and dropped and used parameters or stuff that have been built in. The hard work of it has been done, right, by the FX Dreamer team. So all that is left for you is just understand how to actually use it. For example, when you make a post on Facebook or Instagram, the actual back ends that does, that's actually the code or the coding that does all of that. You don't know how to do that, but you know how to go click on upload a file, post the file, type your text. It's the same thing. It's just about understanding how to, because we're not doing any hardcore program. We're not programming anything here, but just simply, it's all about your how you can be creative, right? It's all about how you can be creative to use all of the parameters that are available to you. There are lots of things that you can do with this, but it's up to you to now be able to play around it and use it, right? So, which is why, over time, which is the reason why I'm actually building two EAs, right? One of them would use indicator, the other one would use candlestick patterns, so that you can now start to, you can have an idea of what's possible and how to go about it. And I'll give you a solid ground to get started in pushing, okay? Okay, so far I hope, so far I hope we enjoyed the training, and I hope remember, it's not going to be a watch once and you mastered it, except you've done something like this before, then it will. But you want to, as much as possible, rewatch. I'll be uploading the video once it's out later today on the YouTube channel, so that you can always rewatch it. And then remember, we would be taking this even further and optimizing this particular EA. We'll optimize it, and then we'll build one more EA before the lifetime of this workshop. And remember, to get access to those other classes, we'll still have about 5 classes or thereabouts before for this workshop or more. So to get access to those classes, you need to have created your account and funded your account. I hope you all have done that. If you haven't, just let me know and we'll see how to, or you reach out to your account manager once you have, and then you'd also be able to get access to it. Okay, so I'm going to be ending the recording. If you're watching this on the YouTube, make sure you leave a like, leave a comment, and make sure you subscribe to the channel as well.